Hi, Windy. How are you doing?
Hello, Ben. It's so good to see you again.
Good to see you. We keep on meeting like this. Um, so some people will know us because we've previously done a Woodbrook course together, and we're going to do another Woodbrook course hopefully in the autumn. So the title of it is Quaker Visions of God, which is like a gloriously ambiguous and like billowy sort of tentish title that could sort of have a lot underneath it. There could be a lot that's sheltering
Much
there,
like God.
much like God itself. So
Hmm.
I suppose I'm going to just kind of run straight in there and say, how do you imagine God? And have you had experiences that have kind of crystallized a vision or visions of God for you?
Yeah. I've had an idea of God since I was a very young child. My first education of God was in a Pentecostal context in North America, in the American South. And the God I was introduced to was a person. And God had a gender. God was a he. And I imagined God as a kind of beneficent but grouchy grandfather. I think I may have modeled him after my own grandfather, who would ask me for kisses by saying, "Give me some sugar." And then he would say, "That's too much sugar." Um, God was a person that I knew, and I believed that I was having conversations with God regularly. I would pace. I know this is a part of many religious traditions, sort of stimming and talking to God. I definitely, found my way into that tradition on my own by instinct, and I believed that God answered me. And in the words of George Fox, I had many openings as a child. Um, I became angry with God, this person, eventually. I learned, this was the 1980s, and I learned about the famine in Ethiopia. And I was very upset by the idea that um, God would let these children die. And I had questions about how this beneficent grandfather, who was also all powerful, which I might have believed my own grandfather to believe at this age, could allow something like this to happen. After all, my grandfather insisted I eat hot dogs as a snack regularly. If anything was wrong, it needed to be solved with more food.
Right.
Um, but God, the grandfather, was not providing food for his children and grandchildren. And I had questions about this, and I went. This is in the context of a Pentecostal school and church in the American South, and I went to the head of school, who was also the head minister of this little rural community. And I asked him how God could allow something like this starvation to happen. And I was wrestling with the problem of evil, but he did not know that I was wrestling with the problem of evil. And his answer was that Satan had angered God and was now on earth causing problems, and that one of those problems was famine. And I thought that the response would necessarily be that God would forgive Satan, that I had been taught very explicitly to forgive those who offended me. And I didn't understand why God would not live by God's own advice here. And I began to try to organize this community to pray for God to forgive Satan. So my petition was very much not answered. The starvation in Ethiopia continued and was met with revulsion and horror by the people that I was in community with. I had always been a weird kid, pacing around and talking to God, even in that environment is weird. And now I was talking about Satan all the time. I left the church as a young teenager. I was really disinterested in being a part of any church community My grandmother was a Methodist and attempted to bring me to church. And I just thought it was ludicrous to engage with any kind of religious community because I was still very angry with my idea of God and the way that God did not answer my prayers. And it wasn't until I became a Quaker and I learned about this concept of continuing revelation that any relationship with a divine force made any sense. That I began to understand God as not being a person, um, and certainly not a wish fulfillment service. But I did begin to see God in each of us. That, when we say that the divine light is in each of us, I have interpreted that to mean that God is in me and God is in you and God is in each of us. And that when we worship together or when we are just in relationship with each other, these are our prayers. And we are interceding in each other's lives through worship and through prayer. And so God continues to be a force that we petition constantly, but God is no longer a grandfather that lives in the sky and fulfills wishes. God is a force that labors with God's self through our relationships in continuing revelation.
That's really interesting because what I sort of hear you saying with my sort of professional theologian's hat on is that you've come to that point in the journey which is often called process theology. So, process theology being the idea that God is in relationship with the universe and that the universe changes in response to God and God changes in response to the universe and that God is kind of nestled in the world. I mean, if you read Alfred North Whitehead, the original kind of innovator of it, he has some lovely images of God. He says, God is the artist of the universe, so not the king or the autocrat or the kindly grandfather. And he sort of says, oh, God is the eros of the universe. So like this loving, persuasive force that lets the world be the world, but tries to draw out goodness woven in the world. So have you become a sort of process theologian Quaker?
I do love some process theology, and I think that traditional Quaker theology has a lot in common with process theology, which, of course, we're going to cover in this course. Of
Sure.
course, of course.
Of course, of course. And that's an amazing segue. That's fantastic. Lovely.
All right. Bye, Ben.
Bye bye.